Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nugentino Cinema. And today I'm back again with Kay. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. So we're here today to review The Place Beyond the Pines. It's a movie from well, some may say 2012, some may say 2013. For those that are into Letterbox, this is a big controversy on whether, when things are released in a film festival, whether you consider them the film festival year or the year of theatrical release. I usually say
Mhm.
theatrical release, but it was at TIFF in 2012. How
Yeah,
do you
I
feel
feel
about
like
that?
that's more fair because, you know, I don't think a festival release necessarily counts. Like it's in the festival circuit is how I would refer to it, and then like it gets released from there.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah,
I would say like when a movie's released in the theaters, the cast is doing interviews. Everyone's like kind of just releasing it into the world, and that feels like the main
Mhm.
release. And but anyway,
That's
so
when
it's
people
almost
can
about 10
see
years.
it.
Yeah, exactly. And I consider the release when the public can go see it, like in one's country usually. Like if I have the
Sure.
ability to go see this movie, then that's when it's released. But But yeah, so this is actually one of my favorite movies. It's directed by Derek Cianfrance, starring Ryan Gosling and Bradley Cooper and Eva Mendes and Ray Liotta. Rest in peace. He
Mhm.
died recently. But yeah, I love it. I've seen it many times. And had you ever heard of this movie?
Yeah, so this is one that I had heard about when it first came out, and I meant to see it, but I just never did, and then it fell off my radar. So it had been withering in my watch list until you brought it up as one we should watch. So I'm glad you did. I really liked it.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, had you ever seen
Yeah.
like Blue Valentine or anything like that?
No, I still need to see Blue Valentine. You would think, as somebody who admires Ryan Gosling very much, I would have seen all of these movies, but no, I haven't.
Yeah, Blue Valentine's also from Derek Cianfrance. and
Nice.
uh, and then The Light Between Oceans, that was pretty underseen. I think it didn't do very good at the box office, but
Mhm.
it's starring Michael Fassbender and Alicia Vikander, and that was really good, I thought. And then after that, those are the three movies he has. But um, he did I Know This Much Is True, which is like an HBO miniseries starring Mark Ruffalo playing twins, and I love that one too. But he's actually one of my favorite directors. Like I really like him.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
know that. Okay, I have a blind spot to take care of then.
Yeah, I'm probably the only person in the world, well, maybe I'm not, but that has a Derek Cianfrance related tattoo, related to his movies.
Oh,
I
what?
have
What is it?
I have these pines right here on my
Oh, that's
wrist.
cool.
Yeah,
Nice.
it was kind of like a mixture of meanings. Like I love travel, and there's some like kind of personal things that in the movie that kind of related to me, and also just my love of the movie, obviously. So I thought it'd be a cool tattoo.
Yeah, you'll have to tell
But
me more about it as we chat. I'd like to hear how it relates.
yeah, for sure. Well, to get into it, what were your like initial thoughts on the movie?
Yeah, so because it has been so long since it came out, and I hadn't really thought about it very much until this opportunity to watch it. I went in relatively blind. I knew Ryan Gosling was in it. I knew a little bit about like what kind of character he plays, but that was really all I had going in. So this was just a terrific watch experience or viewing experience for me because
Mhm.
this film has so many it unfolds in such an unexpected way that for me it was completely fresh, and at every turn I was just like, wow, I didn't expect this to come next. And so it was super satisfying for me in that way. I was really engaged. I'd mentioned to you when we were chatting before we started this conversation that I watched this really late last night. I think I started it at like 12:30, maybe 1 a.m. And I had
Okay.
planned to maybe just watch part of it and then finish it in the morning because tight schedule for me.
Yeah.
But I ended up watching it just all the way through, completely engrossed, leaned in. I was really captivated by it. So I would say that's my first impression. I was just really kind of awestruck at how the story held my interest from start to finish so completely.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's got a really
Yeah.
interesting structure, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's cool. I wish I could go back. There's a lot of movies I wish I could see for the first time again, and this would probably be
Mm-hmm.
one of them. I think I had maybe gotten spoiled a little bit when I was like watching interviews and stuff when the movie was coming out, and I
Mm-hmm.
actually had an interesting experience with it the first time I watched it. I went to see it at a theater, like an independent theater downtown in Houston, and but I'd been up like all night for whatever reason. I have no idea why, and because it's like 10 years ago now, but.
Sure.
Um, so I got there, and this is like an 11 a.m. showing, and I'd been up all night. But yeah, so I started to fall asleep like towards the end of the Ryan Gosling section, and I just saw
Mm-hmm.
like bits and pieces, and then like I think I fell asleep like for a massive part of the Bradley Cooper part, and and then like I woke up in like the middle of like the Dane DeHaan section, and I was like, I have no idea what's happening here, and I
Man.
was just confused, like why. Like I was confused at the shifting in time and like, and so initially like I like didn't like it, but that was completely my own fault because I wasn't even like paying attention really. But I saw it
You were
again in the
sleeping.
theater. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I saw it again in the theater, and the second time I saw it in the theater, I loved it. And it wasn't quite a 5 out of 5 after that second time, I don't think, but like after a few rewatches, it was eventually a 5. And yeah, it's one of my favorites of all time, like pretty high up there. It's definitely my favorite Derek Cianfrance movie. And yeah, the first thing I think about is that the beginning section with Ryan Gosling. I feel like is like an absolutely perfect like movie, like a mini movie.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, it's I mean Ben Mendelsohn is great, his partner who he robs banks with. Um, and then obviously Ryan Gosling's amazing. All the bank robbery scenes are like super tense. And the score, which goes throughout the whole movie, but the score in the movie is amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, there are so many great details throughout the film that tie each section together, even though there's so much time between them. And that's something that I really like too. The score is terrific. One of my favorite parts. The way it's shot is really beautiful too. Like, even just the opening sequence with all of the credits is so good. So I completely agree. The strongest part of the film, though I would say like it's a strong film overall, that first part is so good. And now I'm curious, how many times have you seen this movie?
Let me take a look at my letterbox real quick. My
Yeah, pull
guess,
it
or
up.
right off the top of my, yeah, I have the stats, but my guess off the top of my head is like maybe 5 times.
That's pretty
Um,
good.
yeah, let me take a look here.
Yeah, and
It's
this
I
is in
used
your
to
top
not log
100
all
as
my
well.
rewatches. Oh yeah, it's pretty high up there too. It's like if not in the top 20, the top 30 for sure.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it says I've seen it 7 times. I used to not log rewatches, so I would say
Mhm.
I've probably seen this at least 9 times.
Wow. So you know this movie like the back of your hand, huh?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I really love it, and yeah, it's just I love this. Like my biggest thing that like really endears it to me is I love the whole idea of like a ripple through time and like cause and effect, and
Hmm.
how the choices that you make like affect like future generations in ways that you don't even realize.
Hmm.
And like Dane DeHaan's story is all affected by this guy who died 25 years earlier. And I think, or not 25, 15 years earlier.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and like the music, I think really kind of captures that. Like there's a moment where they're riding, like him and Ben Mendelsohn are riding through like the forest on their motorcycles, and that's when they first see each other. And it's
Hmm.
kind of this strange like feeling, this strange music as they're kind of looking back and forth. And then like Ryan Gosling pulls up to this like edge and like looks down at him. They start talking. There's kind of this weird vibe, this kind of like epic vibe. But I feel like what it's getting at is like this is a turning point, like where his life's gonna be different now that he met this person. And then especially when he pulls up to the lights, like the stoplight, and he's looking at the bank after they've talked about robbing a bank, and that's the moment that he decides for sure to rob a bank. That's when everything changes, and
Hmm.
um, and the ripples are set into motion. And then obviously Bradley Cooper, it's taken further once. And spoiler alert, obviously, if you haven't seen the movie, anybody's watching, they'll be full of spoilers. But Bradley Cooper changes things for his family, and obviously for Ryan Gosling's family. when he just kind of bursts into this house and shoots Ryan Gosling. And it's kind of questionable whether it's warranted. I mean, like obviously he's a bank robber and he's broken into this house, but it seems like he wasn't. He was kind of sitting down at a point where he was like ready to be arrested, and then Bradley Cooper just comes in there like a bull in a china shop and just shoots. Um, and then he has to deal with that for the rest of his section of the movie. But yeah, I think the cause and effect thing and like the sins of the father ideas, for lack of a better term, are really well explored. And yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it does so well in capturing the generational impact of a choice. And I like that it explains it, like you really feel for every character involved. Like there's a very human component to everybody that you meet in this film. And so it's kind of like, best intentions don't always work out that way. Like you understand, like, he left this job in order to try to take care of his family, and he did that the best he could, and it didn't work, and so he found this other avenue to try to support his family. And I forget the line, it's something like every person's right is like to have a child and whatever, like just to basically pursue their
Well,
own
yeah, he's talking
happiness.
about like he's trying to convince Eva Mendes to like settle
Yeah,
down with him, but she's already met another person and has another relationship with Kofi, who's played by Mahershala Ali. In the early
yeah.
role, he would go on to win an Oscar. But
Yeah, he's so great. But yeah, you understand why, like you truly understand why, like their motivations, and it's
yeah,
coming from the most part from a good place. It's just misguided, but they're also trapped in their circumstances too. So, yeah, it's a very like humanistic movie, I think, in that way. Like it's really trying to capture that.
yeah, and I love the
Yeah.
feeling after he's gone. And you have Dane DeHaan like looking at that picture that we see taken at the beginning of the movie, and it's
Mhm.
him and Eva Mendes and Ryan Gosling in this like ice cream shop. But
Mhm.
I love the feeling of that, like, because I've had family members who have died before I was born, and I've seen pictures of them, and I feel like it still captures that feeling, and it feels like Ryan Gosling's character is a real person who's really gone, and I feel
Mhm.
like you feel the weight of that in the movie, and I think that's really impressive. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and that makes me think of, like, again, those little details that are so good, like the ice cream bit that they set up in the first part, and then it comes back around, and like later you see him casually, like the son, I forget his name, casually eating ice cream, and like we as the audience understand the emotional significance even though he doesn't. And it's things like
Yeah,
that where it's the connectedness that you get with the characters feels so personal to where like even other characters in the film, it's a kind of intimacy, I feel like, that they develop with these people.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And another thing that I like about the movie, I mean, it's obviously great emotionally. It's really well written. One thing to
Mhm.
note is he co-wrote it. Derek Cianfrance co-wrote it with I think Darius Martyr and Ben Cochio maybe. But Darius Martyr went on to direct Sound of Metal, the recent movie about the metal drummer who goes deaf.
I
And that
love
was
that
also
one.
yeah, it's really good. And yeah, that's produced by Derek Cianfrance. It's originally a movie that Derek Cianfrance was going to direct, but he passed it on to Darius. But yeah, so that's really cool. But I like how this movie infuses genre in an interesting way. Like all the car chase scenes and all the bank robbery scenes are really good. And then like once you get into the Bradley Cooper section, it kind of feels like Serpico or something, like this like hot like cop drama. And
Mhm.
it's just like I don't know, it's really well done, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. The I do still, I know I just said this, but the opening act is the strongest, and it does just, like, it's so, tense. You had mentioned before too, like, the bank robbing scenes are so good, and I love the little details, like how his voice breaks when he's yelling, and it's just, like, those things that ground it so much in reality. Like, he's he's trying to kind of play this character and be this guy, and in a way he is, but, like, it like he breaks through that a little bit too, just in those little things of like his nerves showing and his voice breaking and panicking when he doesn't know, like when there's a shield or something to keep him from hopping over the desk. Those little things are so well done. And then the way that, yeah, it does transition so effortlessly into a completely different tone where it is this like super tense in a different way, like smoldering tension that
Yeah.
keeps you engaged, where you don't really know. Like I was genuinely guessing at what was going to happen next the entire time. Like there were moments where I was like, oh, maybe this or that, but it really kept me so engaged. And I mean, that's rare for films like that when it's just like a standalone drama, let alone when it's trying to accomplish so many different tones within all like one film. And then at the end, it almost turns into like this coming of age teen bonding like party movie. So it really like runs this full spectrum and then wraps itself back around full circle like a snake biting its own tail, because he like
Mhm.
ends up in the same position that his, well, not the same, but essentially the same position, spiritually the same as his dad
Yeah.
when we first meet him at the beginning
Well,
of
he's
the
also a
movie.
drifter on a motorcycle, so yeah,
Yeah,
it
so
comes
it
full
has like
circle.
this cyclical element to it, even though it contains so many different styles. So yeah, that's a great point to hit on, in the fact that it blends together so well and overlaps. It really worked for me.
Yeah. I think it's
Yeah.
great. I think if I was to criticize the movie, the third chapter would be the weakest. Um, I think maybe some of the performances I wasn't into the first time around, like Dane DeHaan and Emery Cohen. Emery Cohen being Bradley Cooper's son.
Hmm.
He has a very strange accent and like vibe, but I think what
Hmm.
they're going for is that he tried to kind of like disassociate from his dad and like have his own identity. Um, like this, like, because his dad's like this, like, respectable cop and slash politician, and he wanted to become this Jersey Shore guy. So, but
Yeah, he has that heavy like uh East Coast accent for sure.
mhm. Yeah, but I guess that would be one segment that could be slightly criticized, but it's grown on me throughout the years. And like, I was also going to compare it to a coming of age movie. And yeah, I love the music in that. I love the music in the party sequence where I think he takes some pills or something and then like really kicks in. He's sitting there and there's that like really bassy, like intense music.
Hmm.
And then he like kind of like goes up the stairs and like sees the Bradley Cooper's picture on the wall. I feel like that whole sequence was really good. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and it's great because there's this uncertainty of what he's going to do next. Like there's this unpredictability and wildness that, like I wasn't sure if he was gonna go kill him, like you really don't know what's
mhm.
gonna happen. Yeah, it's so engaging. I love this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. Like it's like, I think the director, I mean, I think a lot of directors do this when they're interviewed. They kind of try to simplify things cuz they want the viewer to like have the broader thoughts for the or the more grand thoughts for themselves. But I heard the director compare this movie to like Creep Show, which is like one of his favorite movies. Just in that like it's segmented, so it's like an anthology film, and in this movie we get three different chapters, like three very very distinct chapters. But yeah, and it's also, I remember them comparing it to Psycho with like the shift in that movie where you leave what you think would be the main character and you go into something different. So that's interesting in comparing it to these sort of like very genre horror movies. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because it's a very it approaches like male relationships throughout the film in various ways, whether it's father and son, biological father versus like stepfather. Like there's all these different facets of male relationships that are explored as well. Like Eva Mendes does play relatively significant role in this as the love interest and mother to one of the people, but I mean it's not necessarily, she's not front and center in this, and it's not
Hmm.
a complaint by any means. I think it's a really valuable film, and like I said, I think she does really well in her role. It's she's terrific. And it adds a lot, but it's definitely a lot about, and I'm not really obviously the right person to speak to this, but it seems like it's a lot of trying to maybe not unpack, but just look at these different facets of male bonding. And I'm wondering if any parts of that stand out to you as being different from maybe what you've seen in other films in terms of approach, or if any of those elements stood out to you in a significant way.
Well, I thought it was interesting. I feel like there's like always consequence to everything that happens, and it paints the father-son relationship as very significant and very
Mm-hmm.
important. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like and also I find it interesting how it seems to imply, or like say, like everybody's kind of like bound to become like their father, or become like this like significant
Mm-hmm.
father figure, because like obviously Dane DeHaan's character kind of ends up in the same position as Ryan Gosling's in at the beginning of the movie, and then you have like Bradley Cooper, and I feel like his son, like while he's trying to get away from what his father's like, he's sort of like, I feel like at the end when he's at that like political like campaign, he's sort of like, it's implying that he might become like, more together and sort of try to follow that path, or his father's path maybe a little bit. And then Bradley Cooper is following his father's path because his father was a politician and a cop,
Mm-hmm.
so he's pretty much
Mm-hmm.
doing the same thing. And I feel like it definitely talks, or like explores the idea of everybody, there just being this generational kind of path that we're put on, and we always end up like one of our parents. So I think that's
Mm.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that that's one of the points of the film then, is like this kind of idea that we're trapped in the lineage that, came before us, that like even if we try our hardest to get away from something, we're going to snap back to it? I mean, it feels a little bit pessimistic in that way. I mean, they grow into these roles in their own distinctive ways, but it's still this kind of like, it feels very limiting, don't you think?
For sure, and I don't think anything's like 100%. Like I think that can be broken away from if somebody wants it, but like I just think it's something that's very common in life. Like I mean, I see it with a lot of people
Mm,
I know, and even myself. Like
sure.
you always have like a lot of traits, or a lot of people have a
Mhm.
lot of traits of their father or whoever they're raised by. It doesn't have to be somebody that's
Yeah.
their biological parents, but um yeah, I think the movie explores that in a really interesting way. I remember when I saw it, I remember coming out of the theater the second time I saw it, and some guy behind me was like, he's like an older guy, and he was
Mhm.
like, that movie like really made me think about my dad or something like that. And I don't know, I always just like when a movie, because my theater, it was like my local theater, and like people that probably aren't like super big movie fans, or like
Mhm.
cinephiles, I should say, like they
Sure.
like movies on a basic level. But
Mhm.
whenever a movie can make somebody have like a deep connection to the movie like that, like I don't know, I think it's cool. But yeah.
Yeah, and it is again like that humanistic thing, like whether it's talking about how we're influenced by the people around us, and there are a lot of questions in that too, of like, Ryan Gosling's son trying to figure out the truth about his dad, and then the character, I am spacing on his name, but in the film, his name is Kofi, and him being like, I am your dad, and so there's that element of the relationship too, and like how much weight does that give, in comparison to like whatever influence you may feel toward your biological parents, even if you don't know them. So yeah, it's very personal. It's very like emotionally grounded in those things, even as it's trying to explore them. And it's interesting too, because like there are so many different kinds of relationships they explore. Even like when they're robbing banks, there's the line of like, oh, we're going to be the greatest duo ever, and so there's kind of this like brotherhood between them. And um even after, all of the time, and after he had a gun in his mouth, had his life
Yeah.
threatened, he still says that like, Ryan Gosling was like a good man and like a good partner and all this stuff. And so there's elements of like that sort of bonding as well. And so it just really feels like it's trying to show, I don't know, maybe not show, but it's trying to kind of unpack different ways of people finding identity and meaning in their relationships, but specifically male relationships it focuses on. So yeah, and it's just it's so engaging. It doesn't linger too much on anything. It definitely keeps it moving, but still circles back. So I kind of lost my
Yeah.
train of thought halfway through, but there was a point in there somewhere. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting. I feel like the movie's really long, or not really, but it's long. It's like 2.5 hours. But I think it's interesting that each segment, they almost feel really fast paced and almost too quick within those segments, because I feel like each segment almost feels like a fully fleshed out movie in a way. So like it moves really
Yeah.
quick, and almost like I wish I could have more within each segment. Like I almost could watch like a 3.5 hour movie of this. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know that a mini series format would necessarily help because it would break it up too much, but I definitely agree that something longer would help flesh it out a bit more. Maybe it could have given a bit more to the final act that could have had more impact, but yeah, because it does lose steam a little bit along the way, but still so solid all the way through. And then just like as a quick note, talking about the ending and then music and all of that, it ended on a Bon Iver song, and I was like, oh yeah, this
oh
is an
yeah,
older movie, but it still hit for me. So like that was I forgot to mention that when we were talking about the music, but yeah, I wish it would have been a little bit longer or just kind of used that last segment in a way that was stronger.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to think of this as an older movie, like, and I guess it is now, like
Yeah.
9 years ago.
Yeah,
Like to
I
me, it
mean,
feels like
that's old.
recent. Yeah,
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 wow.
time is flying.
I mean, gosh, that makes me think like my niece is 9 years old and she's like a whole person. So that's a whole person is worth of time.
Well, my
Yeah,
sister
so
is like
strange.
20. Yeah, my sister's like 20 years old now, and this movie came out, she would have been like 11. So there's definitely a big gap.
So funny, but it's still like so true and relevant, and I think that it speaks to kind of how timeless the story is, that it feels like it could have come out this year and had the same impact. It's
Hmm.
just so, like we're talking a lot about like the emotional elements and impact and stuff, but just in terms of like a story, it's really good too. Like the first
Yeah.
section is following Ryan Gosling as he's kind of trying to push against, he wants to be a good guy, and you see this over and over again. Like he's always trying to do the right thing, even when he gets into robbing banks, and it's only really when he gets too caught up in it and it's his aggression and feeling that he needs to prove himself, like those are the things that push him to put himself in a difficult situation, which eventually is his downfall. But up to that point, like they were hugely successful. But because he got into that fight that challenged him so much in his role and like providing and being a father figure and his place within that group, like that's when he like shifts. And so you see this whole emotional arc and this whole story, like you mentioned, it's like a short film in itself play out, and it's completely gripping. And I remember, because like I said, I went into it completely fresh. Like when he dies, I was completely shocked. I was like, where's the movie, where could the movie go now? I kept
Yeah.
thinking that like it cuts to uh the police officer waking up in the bed, and I almost was like, was that a dream sequence? Like was that real? And so I almost had to recalibrate into the next storyline, and then you get this whole like drama, and it's all this stuff like dealing with corruption, and so there's all these different elements of like people pushing against their situations and the systems that they're in, trying to be good people, and they just can't. Like it's so disheartening, and it deals with all of these like really challenging larger social issues, even as it has these like really tight character pieces laid out as well. So it's just so strong on so many levels. Um, but now I'm curious. Okay, so acting and all of that aside, is there like a storyline that you like the most? Because I think I like the second segment in terms of story the most.
I think I like the first segment pretty much all around most, like in story
Mm,
too. I like the
yeah,
atmosphere of it. I like
yeah,
the gritty like. I love Ryan Gosling's character, how he's this motorcycle rider that does these like crazy like stunts at county fairs and stuff,
he's so
and
cool.
yeah, and has all these like ridiculous like tattoos, and
Hmm.
but even once he like tries to like live in this place to settle that like hopefully settle down in his mind with his family,
Hmm.
and he like moves in with Ben Mendelsohn. Like I love the atmosphere of like just them living in that place, like him in that little trailer tucked away on this like piece of land, and
Yeah.
I love there's a lot of movies. I feel like this is a common theme through like a lot of my favorite movies. I love movies about drifters and people that are kind of like wandering from place to place and don't really know what to do. Like we reviewed
Hmm.
Strozek together. That's one of my favorite movies, and
Yeah.
that movie has a drifter kind of element to it, and so does The Master, which is my favorite movie. Um, yeah, so I think yeah that was definitely my favorite segment all around.
Drifter
Yeah,
at heart, huh?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it has a bit of a almost like a Twin Peaks feeling too. Like it's kind of this like at night, not quite neon, but just like very like dim atmospheric thing. And you'd mentioned before the shot of like him up on the hill when he's riding his bike and he first meets Ben Mendelsohn. And I love that shot so much of like him up framed by all these trees and all the roots
yeah.
coming down. Um, yeah,
I
so
think I used to
great.
have that as my Facebook cover photo.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, like a
I
while,
get
like a long time ago.
it.
Yeah,
So good.
yeah,
But yeah, so I think, yeah, definitely aesthetically, like overall construction, the first one is the strongest, but yeah, I just love like the way the crime story unfolds in the second one, and like he even goes to his dad for advice with that, who, helps him out. And so it's like it works on so many levels. Like it dips in and out of being kind of a macro perspective on these people's lives in terms of the systems that they're stuck inside of, and then it zooms in too, so you really see like the emotional turmoil that these people are going through, and yeah, just their circumstances. Like in the second segment you get that whole like therapy scene where he's like, I'm fine, and then it devolves into like he is very much not fine. And you see like later there's the dinner scene and his wife is kind of trying to keep him home and protect him, and he goes out and gets mixed up in all of this stuff. And so it's just yeah, it does a really good job of stitching together those micro and macro perspectives. And I think that that's part of what works so well for me, is that it doesn't ever feel like one note. And as soon as you might get bored with a story, it shifts. And so it's the pacing of it is was really good for me.
yeah. Same here. And yeah, I do like the Bradley Cooper segment.
Mm,
I feel like that was one of the last great roles for Ray Liotta. Like he did stuff afterwards, but I think it was the last time he got like a really good part and really good scenes to do.
mm,
Like the whole like thing where they come to take the money away from Eva Mendes, and but they're really just coming to steal it, and then they end up giving it to
yeah.
Bradley Cooper, and he has to deal with that guilt, and then
Yeah.
Bradley Cooper deciding to like dismantle all this stuff and try to turn all these guys in. It's a great drama that's being dealt with, and like I love the scene where Ray Liotta kind of like stops Bradley Cooper, and you just see the corner of his face as he's like staring into the car, and he's like, "Follow me," and then you have that scene where he like follows him into the woods, and you don't know
So
what's gonna happen.
tense. Exactly. It's that kind
Yeah.
of thing where it's like I was watching that scene completely engrossed, and the cars are moving so slowly, and like it's giving me goosebumps thinking about it right now, because I was just like, what is going to happen? And I was thinking, I was like, what would I do? It's so
Mhm.
scary. And that he manages to make it out and then like climb the ladder because of it is just crazy.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's so twisty, but in a way that feels true to life. Like there are some dramas where it's like there are these major twists and it's engaging, but it's just like this is so outside of reality, whereas this film, it feels so realistic. Like, we know that there's corruption in these spaces. We know what people are subjected to, when they're faced with like police searches like this, and the trauma that can come for the officers and the people involved and everybody. And so it's just like it uses these existing things in order to tell stories in a way that feels like it just feels really tangible, like you can kind of, it feels like I've almost heard pieces of these stories before in real life, and so it gives it a
Yeah.
real, it grounds it. I was trying to think of a different word, but that's all I've got. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all explored in a really great way. And I think honestly,
Mhm.
like, I feel like Derek Cianfrance is one of our like greatest filmmakers. I mean, like Blue Valentine is another amazing movie to me. Not a lot of people talk about The Light Between Oceans, but I love that one too.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like I wish he got to make more movies, or he might still make more movies. He's young, but or not young, but like in his 40s or 50s. But
Mhm.
yeah, he hasn't made a movie in 6 years. But I guess I know this much is true. It's kind of a movie. It's a mini series, but that one's really good too. But yeah, he's up there. Like, I don't hear many people talk about him, but like I feel like he's like at the level of like PTA. And this is a movie like I feel like this is kind of comparable to Magnolia in a way. Magnolia has a lot
Mm.
of similar themes, but yeah, I mean I love him. I think he's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, and it just occurred to me, I wanted to ask, so in the final segment, there is, the scene where the two sons are kind of having their, the climax of their story, where, um, Ryan Gosling's son has the gun and he goes to approach, um, basically to like, approach this other guy and get some sort of what he might see as vengeance, or just he's overwhelmed by anger and hurt by everything that's happened. And the way that the scene is done, you're kind of left not sure if he killed the other guy or not, because you see his body laying on the floor. And then he does fire the gun at one point. And so it's interesting too, because it replays like the beginning of the film. Like, he's upstairs in this house, he's kind of trapped when the father's coming up, and there's this suspense, and you don't really know what's happening. And I had assumed that Bradley Cooper's son had been killed. And when you find out that he only had a concussion, I almost felt like that detracted a little bit from the intensity of that scene. um because even later, like, he has, the son has Bradley Cooper on his knees in the woods, and he's like, just tell me that my son is alive, and he doesn't. Maybe he doesn't even know if he's left alive. But
Yeah, I don't think he does.
yeah, but I'm wondering, did that have the same effect for you? Like, do you feel that it was weaker because he survived, or do you feel like that needed to happen?
I can't say how much it had an effect on me the first time I watched it. I forget exactly.
Mm,
Um, because so many times I've watched this, it's been a rewatch, and I've known what was gonna happen. But to
sure.
me, I feel like it's fine. I feel like it's fine the way it plays out. Like I feel like all the tension within that scene is still there, and
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like it's okay for it to be lit up like at the very end, just because it implies that that character might follow in a path like his father, and it sort of fits in with these themes that are being explored. But
Mm.
yeah, I didn't have a big issue with it, but I can see what you're saying. Mhm.
Yeah, and I don't disagree, because then it's kind of like they're both replaying the experiences that their fathers went through. One surviving a gunshot and becoming a sort of hero, or at least having this victim narrative that they can work with, and the other becoming essentially an outlaw because of it, and falling into that role. And so yeah, I mean, I think that it does work that way. I just feel like when I had been under the impression that the one son had died, I was like, "Oh, that's heavy." And then when I found out that he wasn't, I was like, "Okay, that's fine." Like, it felt okay to me, but it didn't feel like as, I don't know, I feel like it didn't hit as much for me as it did before
Yeah.
then. So yeah, that was just one thing where I was like, it's all right.
Yeah, I can
But
see
it makes
that. And I
sense in
think a
the
lot of the
overall
issues,
themes.
yeah, I think a lot of the issues come in the third act, so I can see that. But for me,
Mm.
I think it played out fine. And I also feel like there was unresolved stuff that Bradley Cooper has to explore with his son. Like he never really treated his son that great. He kind of ignored him and like almost felt
Mm.
guilty because he felt like he took away this kid's father, and he felt the
Mm.
shame. And he even says in the therapy session, like, I have a hard time like looking at my son, and
Mhm.
that's like, that's definitely affected the kid. Or so I feel like when he's alive at the end, and Bradley Cooper is like super upset, obviously, and he's like, just tell me my son's like still alive. And then once he is alive, I feel like it implies that they might, kind of mend whatever issues they have. But yeah, so I like it in that
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, and then there's the interesting conclusion of their storyline too, where the son is kind of unceremoniously shoved out onto the stage with his father as he's accepting the campaign that he just won. Like, he's accepting the position, and they're celebrating, and you see him kind of go out there a little bit like timidly at first, and then he like
Hmm.
eases into it, and you can definitely see him like standing in that same position, and you could see how he could evolve to be just like his dad as the other son is driving away on his motorcycle. So it does, like, I guess it does need to happen in order for everything to be tied up that way. um but yeah, I don't know, I just wish that it had had so many turns up to that point. I guess I just expected that last punch, but then it got me again. I was wrong. It
Yeah,
keeps you guessing until the end. Um, yeah, there weren't a lot of other things like that that I had issues with. I think it worked well as a story overall. Yeah, I mean, it worked great as a story overall. I liked it.
yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for watching it. I think, yeah, it's one of my
Of
favorite
course.
movies. So
I'm so
it's
glad you
always great to be able to
suggested
share
it.
it.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. I think, like, especially after this discussion, I wasn't sure where I was going to land with my star rating. I was between a 4 and a 5, but I was like, where am I gonna land? And I think
Yeah.
it's gonna be like a 4, 4.5 with a heart bump.
Hmm.
Like, that's how much I like this
Nice.
movie. Yeah, not perfect. Maybe I'll get up to a 5-star club with you someday, but
Yeah.
yeah, for a first watch, it's very gripping, and I would recommend it to anybody who likes those kinds of like thrilling dramas. It's so good. It
Yeah.
smolders.
Yeah, that's a perfect word to describe it. But yeah, it had to grow for me too. I think I'd originally gave it a 3.5. Eventually it was
Mm.
a 4, and then it was eventually a 5. But I love it. I think it's
You
awesome. I've
climb the
seen it.
ladder.
Yeah. Yeah, and now I've seen it 9 times. But
Wow.
yeah. But
Well,
yeah, again, thanks for being here. I think it was a great review.
yeah, it's always nice to chat with you. I'm looking forward to the next one, and yeah, more Drifter movies. Let's keep it going.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot. But yeah. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you
Yeah.
next time. Bye.